Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 266 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today I have the pleasure to introduce you to Chana. Chana is Ryan and Chris's mom. Now again, this is another guest who lost not one but two children. This time not in a single accident, but lost one and then the other one later, and both in adulthood. I'm not going to go into too many details because we do go over a little bit, but I do need to take a minute here to talk to you about following me on social media. So I have just arranged to get new people to help me with my social media, and I really want to try to expand that presence so we can try to reach more people and be able to help even more people on the podcast. So right now, push pause and go on Instagram and start following me. Always Andy's Mom is what I am on Instagram, and follow me and try to like the videos. Also, if you can go on and give some iTunes reviews or podcast reviews on your podcast player, that is helpful too, because I really just want to be able to help as many people as we can. Right now, though, I just want you to sit back and enjoy listening to Chana, Ryan and Chris's mom. Thank you so much, Chana, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I am looking forward to talking to you about both of your boys. So we're going to talk about your sons, Ryan and Chris, today.
Yes.
Yes. And Ryan was your oldest. Ryan's the one that made you a mama. So I guess we'll start out by talking a little bit about Ryan.
He did. So Ryan, I got pregnant with Ryan when I was 15.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I had him when I was 16 in 1993. And pretty much all I ever wanted really in life was just to be a mom.
Really?
Like I was just that kid. You know, I was the babysitting kid and stealing my sister's kids, and that's all I ever wanted to do. So having him, like, I didn't act like a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
In any way at all. I grew up super, super fast with him. I was lucky to have my mom, to help me. So I lived with her, and I was able to stay home for the first 2 years with him. And I spent all my time with him, like every waking moment with him, just teaching him. He learned super fast everything. He was walking before 9 months. He was talking like full sentences at a year and a half. And Ryan is, as a grown man, 5'2".
Oh, really? Okay.
So he's always been very, very, very small. And he was very, very small when he was, a baby as well. So, you see a 1.5-year-old talking, and then they're also very small for their stature. It looked very strange to a lot of people. Like they thought, oh, wow, this kid.
I
know. This kid's really something else.
That is so funny because that so reminds me of my boys. They never, I think of those boys, one of them hit the 4th percentile. They never were above the 4th percentile growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. All mine are pretty small.
But I always say to families, it's great when your kids are small because, everyone thinks they're brilliant. Because they all think they're younger than they are. And I always feel bad for the ones that are really, really tall. Like the kids that are 2.5 that are the size of a 4-year-old. Because people look at them like, what is wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
Why is your kid not potty trained? Why are they acting like this? Why can't they talk better? And because they're 2.5. Exactly. I know she's the size of a 4-year-old. Right. But she's 2.5. So I I always think we're the ones that are lucky, right?
Yeah.
They have these tiny children because they look so precocious and amazing.
Yeah.
It makes us look like really good parents.
Yeah, I had that exact same situation with Brian's cousin, Brianna, my sister's daughter, because she was like way bigger than Ryan.
Yeah.
But they were like only a month apart. So of course, that's exactly how it looked. Like, Ryan was just a little genius and Brianna was just normal. I mean, she wasn't slow. She was nothing. She just looked bigger, a whole lot bigger than Ryan.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
He from day one was a performer though. He loved entertaining everybody. He was always dancing and singing and just a very, very, very happy kid.
Yeah.
He kept on doing that. He went through his childhood. It was, very, very happy until he hit about the teen years, little bit before preteen. And Ryan was just unique. If people were talking about, something that you shouldn't be wearing, Ryan was wearing it. If, he wore the, painted fingernails, eyeliner, everything to be different from anybody. And he got a lot of hell for it in his teenage years. And it kind of molded him to what he was later on in life, because he didn't go along with what everybody else was like. He just refused to be like everybody else. And I think that's one of the most things that I've always admired about him was, I mean, he'd come home and he'd be upset about somebody, teasing him, but he still didn't change the way that he wanted to be.
Oh, that's great.
And I just love that about him.
You're right, because it is such a struggle for teens. Feeling like you want to be just like everybody else and look just like everybody else. And
yeah. He set the show for, all of his friends. And I still see so many of his friends that run around dressed like my Ryan, and
that's awesome.
I mean, from their outfits to their haircuts to the way they do their nails and the eyes and all of it. And it's just, there's so many Ryan lookalikes in his crew. And it came from, where people used to tease him to where people idolized him, and just thought he was the coolest thing in the world. So I really love to see that change when that happened that way.
For sure. And how that, just living with that confidence started to make kids kind of change, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't tease him about this. Maybe he's the one that knows.
Yeah. Not to say that he didn't struggle, with the teasing, and it started off a lot of emotional problems with Ryan when he was younger. He was definitely bipolar. When he was about 12 years old, I caught him, his school caught him cutting.
Oh.
That lasted for a good 2-3 years of in and out of, mental hospitals and trying to get help, which was not helping. Instead, it was kind of making him worse.
Yeah, such a struggle.
Yeah, and at that point in Ryan's life, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but it was kind of a cool thing for kids to do then, and I don't know why it was. But it was.
It still is sort of in certain age groups, to be honest, because I see it all the time. It's the middle school age.
Some of these kids would they would do it and it would be over. But for Ryan, it did become a definite addiction to him.
Yeah.
To where he was definitely relieving a lot of
stress and anxiety.
Whatever, doing that. And he finally did grow out of that.
Well, that's good.
But then he went on to other ways of coping that were not healthy either, unfortunately.
Why don't we step back a little bit? Because I want to talk about just going back. How old was Ryan when Chris was born then?
So Ryan was almost 2.5 years old when Chris was born.
Okay. So you were still a pretty young mama then, weren't you? But you had grown up fast.
Very fast. Very, very fast. Yeah. And he was absolutely wonderful with Chris.
Yeah.
Like, I stressed out so bad in the hospital when I had Chris that I went into postpartum depression because I was just afraid I wasn't going to be able to be this perfect mom that I wanted to be, and wasn't going to be able to give, Ryan enough attention with with a new baby. And
because you're still a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just, I really, really stressed out about it. And I got home and with Chris, and I saw how wonderful Ryan was with him. And I finally calmed down and was able to bond with Chris for the first time, really, because at the hospital I was not, I was just so stressed. I was so upset about having to leave my son, first of all, for the first time to go have another baby.
Yeah.
So, and Christopher was just, Chris, when he was born, I don't hardly ever remember hearing Chris cry. He was just a happy, extremely, extremely happy baby. He had major problems like with formula. So we went through every single formula that there was. But this kid, I mean, he would finish his bottle and he would be smiling ear to ear while formula is just projectile vomiting out of his mouth. Didn't even bother him. I mean, he'd just be giggling through it, and he was just happy all the time and busy. Super, super busy. Like, he had so much energy.
Well, he had to keep up with Big Brother, right?
Yeah, Ryan was kind of low energy in that way, though. I mean, Ryan would sit and watch and pay attention to like episode, shows, or sit with blocks or reading or something, to where Chris was just woof 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 woof, woof all the time, nonstop. And he continued to be like that for pretty much until he was about 15 or 16 years old. He finally.
Oh, really?
Slowed down. Yeah, he was super, super hyper, super, but never, never bad, like a troubled kid. He just was always busy. He just always had something to do, always kept himself busy, was always playing toys, building something, whether it be all my cushions in the middle of the living room or something.
Right. Understandable.
But Ryan and Chris were always together, always, like from a very, since Chris was born up until grade school. Ryan was always his protector, and they had the same friend groups all through school, still do. Chris really, really looked up to Ryan a whole lot until Ryan started to experiment with drugs, and Chris was not about that, and he kind of separated himself from Ryan in that way. They were very, very different in those ways. But he mourned Chris, or he mourned Ryan before we even lost Ryan. Like,
right. Seeing him go through those struggles, for sure.
Yeah.
And then you have two other kids too. So when were they born in relation to the others?
I had Ryan in 93, Chris in 95, and I had Matthew in 2001 and Taya in 2002.
Okay.
So it's kind of like I have two sets of
2 and 2. That's what I was wondering.
Twins. Yeah.
When you were talking about how close Ryan and Chris were, I thought, I bet there was a little gap.
Yep.
Before you had the other. So that's why it was like those two and the other two, right?
Yep. I always say it's like my two sets of of kids there. 'Cause,
I know. I've had to other families like that, and they'll call the younger ones the littles, and compared to the older ones, right? So even though they're not like now, as they grew up, they weren't really the littles, but in your mind, they're still always the littles, because there's that 5-6 year age gap before, and it is like almost a different family, right? Because Chris was in school
100%
by the time you had another baby again, and so you just start over again.
And parenting styles in general, from being a teenager with Ryan and Chris to Matthew and Taya when I was grown, and like patience and just wisdom, and I guess the frontal lobe of my brain was finally developed.
Well, that's true.
I just saw things totally different, and it just, so many things that I struggled with when Ryan and Chris were younger just came so easy to me with Matthew and Taya. At the time, I really thought that having a child at 16 was the perfect plan. But as a, a grown adult, I see that waiting could have probably been a little beneficial.
Right, right. But yet you wouldn't change it for the world, right?
Not for the world. Not for the world.
No, not for the world.
No, I do wish I could take some of my wisdom back to that age, though, that I have now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know.
At least a little.
I keep thinking about my own kids as they grow up and like someday, they'll get there, these teens that I talk to, like someday you're going to realize that your parents aren't idiots when they're talking to you, but you hit that certain age and you think they don't know what they're talking about. So
yeah, girls seem to get that earlier. I found out.
Yeah.
The boys lag on a little bit when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you were starting to talk a little bit about when, Ryan started to kind of have more struggles. So it started with the cutting, but then the coping strategies kind of changed, right?
Yeah, they did. When he was cutting, I mean, we got to where like I would bodily check him every single day.
Yeah.
I had every single knife, scissors, every pokey thing, CDs hidden in my house at that point, to where it became a little bit harder for him to use that. And then he started with smoking marijuana, smoking cigarettes, and then it got to harder stuff.
Yeah.
And he was using triple C's and
I don't even know what that is.
Cough, cold, and cortisone. And if you take it in huge amounts, you get really, really high.
Okay.
Then when Chris he was in about 5th grade, his doctor put him on Concerta for ADHD, and Christopher absolutely hated it. And I thought he was taking it. Well, he wasn't. He was shoving it in the cushions of my couch, and Ryan knew that he was doing this. So Ryan saved up all Chris's Concerta and took 15 of them at one time. And then came up to my room after he finally gave in. And he said, need to go to the hospital.
Wow.
So I took him to the hospital then. And that was the beginning of his treatment days.
Yeah.
He went from mental hospitals to, treatment facilities for drugs at that point. He'd gotten himself in just a little bit of trouble that got him put on probation. Yeah. So therefore, everything he did from then on was counted. And it was just another treatment facility, another mental health facility, JDC. Like it was nonstop until the judge finally, at the age of 16, she called us all as a family into the courtroom, and she said, I don't do this very often, but I am going to dishonorably discharge you from probation. You've failed probation.
Yeah.
She said, I'm not doing you any favors by keeping you on probation, because you keep getting yourself into trouble, and all I see is it just punishing your family, not you, Yeah. So she let him off probation, and Ryan had a good 2 years after that, like really good 2 years, solid.
Oh,
working.
Really?
Yeah, he was working. He had a great girlfriend, and he was doing everything wonderfully. And then my mom died.
Yeah.
And after my mom died was the first time that Ryan tried heroin.
Oh.
And I didn't know that Ryan had even done this until after he passed away, because this was at age 19 that he tried it. I found out like many, many, many years later that he tried it, and he managed to get himself off of that without me even knowing that anything was going on at that point. Wow. He wasn't living with me.
I mean, that's kind of amazing, because honestly, heroin is so dangerous and horrible. It can be just the one time, and yeah.
And then after he got off of that, He got himself in trouble with the law, and he was breaking into cars with some kids, and he went to jail. And when he went to jail, there was a guy in a holding cell next to Ryan, and the guy was sick, and the officer was giving him something. And Ryan said, "What are you giving him?" And he said, "I'm giving him anti-diarrhea medicine. That's what we give to people who are coming off of opiates." So my son got out of jail and looked it up and found out that if you take anti-diarrhea medicine in huge quantities, it gives you the effect of heroin.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So that was Ryan's next addiction that he began. And when he started to do that, I really was clueless as to what he was doing. Honestly, I just knew he was messed up. And, I wasn't allowing him at our house at that point because I had the younger kids. I had Christopher, still living with me. It was super hard. I kicked him out and knew that he was actually homeless, and every night I didn't sleep for at least 2 years of this time. And all I did was stress out about it.
Yeah, it's so hard though. I mean, there's no good choice.
And all I did was stress out about it.
Right? There's no good choice. I I just feel for you and other moms that have to suffer like this because there isn't a good choice.
Yeah, there really isn't.
Like having him in and kind of letting him just live like that and watching him do that to himself and the effect that it has on your other kids is bad.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But then it breaks your mama's heart.
Yeah, because I used to just drive around and look for him and, see if he was sleeping under bridges. And I don't know what I would have done if I would have got him because I, was telling myself I couldn't bring him home. I couldn't let him keep doing the stuff that he was doing.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a catch-22. There was no winning in the situation.
Yeah.
And then one day I'm sitting at my house and somebody comes knocking at my door, and I open the door and it's a police officer, and he says, "We're looking for Ryan. We need him to go back to the hospital." And I said, "Go back to the hospital? What do you mean? First of all, he's not living here right now, but what do you mean go back to the hospital?" And he said, "Well, he was picked up in an ambulance 3 days ago, and they did a test on him, and they say that he needs to go back, that he has a life-threatening heart disease that he needs to have taken care of right away."
Wow.
Absolutely terrifying. So I track my son down. I take him back.
Oh, good.
And they have him go in. He goes through all these series of tests, and they tell us that he has Brugada syndrome.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. I've had a family on the podcast.
Well, there's so much more to this. You're just going to be like, "Oh my goodness."
Because I've had somebody on the podcast with that, actually.
Really? Well, that's what they said he had. So
Okay. Oh, but it wasn't, is what you're saying? It wasn't?
It was not. No.
Oh, okay.
No. We found out later on, actually, after he passed away, I found out it was not Brugada syndrome.
Oh, okay.
It was the pills that he was taking. They caused this false positive in the test. Because Brugada syndrome, the way they explained it to me, is like the heartbeat just drops completely. And then you would, like, if you're at risk for dying from this, you'd have to have a defibrillator put inside your chest that would pump you.
Yes, because actually the family that I had, she lost 2 children, and they had thought they had been misdiagnosed as having a seizure disorder.
Oh goodness!
Because it can come off like that when your heart just stops. Yeah. And it was only after, it was like both kids died, and then the grandma ended up having it discovered. And then now many people in the family have defibrillators, but of course it was too late for her 2 children because they both died. Yeah. But they were it was thought to be something entirely different. So it's a thing that's very easily missed and misdiagnosed, but apparently you can misdiagnose it the other way too, which I did not know.
Yeah, I did. I mean, until Ryan passed away, I still to that day believed that, especially, you know, the day that, which I'll get up to the day that he passed away, but I 100% thought that he died of Brugada syndrome. But, you know, we took him to get all the tests. They said that he did have it, and then they said that they were going to do this small procedure to see that if he was at need of needing a defibrillator put in his heart.
Sure.
And the first time I went to go take him, Ryan took off on me in the middle of another city that we're not even from. I had to drive him, you know, 200 miles away for this place, and Ryan just took off and he wouldn't have the procedure done. Second time, he finally decides he's going to go do it. He has the procedure done, and they're like, okay, you know, he's looking good. It doesn't look like he needs to have a defibrillator, so he just needs to be checked within, you know, a yearly basis. So that's what we remained doing.
Okay.
And for a little bit, at that point, he had to have still been using the pills without me knowing. He was living with a different girlfriend at that time, and she had broke up with him, and he made up some story to me, said that she cheated on him or something. Later on in years, I found out she broke up with him because he was using. But he was getting himself into trouble, and he ended up going to prison.
Oh, wow.
And he spent a year and a half in prison. And during that time, of course, he was clean.
Yeah.
He was clean. He was mentally healthy. He was my absolute best friend. Like, it was the first time I had my son back in, I'm sorry, quite a while. And our conversations that we had, I mean, he had goals. He had many, many, many goals. You know, he got his GED when he was in prison. He was trying to get into a tech school when he got out. And he had many, many plans.
You know, not many people would say that prison was a gift, but in some ways I think prison was a gift. Yeah.
Oh, such a gift. I would do anything to have my son in prison right now. Anything.
Yeah.
And when he got out, he, you know, honestly, I didn't see it coming. That's what really got me. When Ryan got out, he went with a couple of his old friends, and he drank a couple times, and, you know, I got him on him about that. You know, you don't need to be drinking when you're on parole. I realize you're, you know, at that time, 24 years old, but it's different for you, you know. And, you know, he was extremely respectful to me all the time. And, you know, there was a couple times that I questioned, was he on something, you know, and I'd ask him and he'd say no. And then he started dating a girl that our whole family grew up with. And, you know, she was just wonderful for him. And he really, really started focusing on his music. He's been rapping since he was, you know, 10 years old. And he just started, you know, coming up with all these songs and just spending all this time, you know, recording and working. And him and his girlfriend were living in this one apartment. And, you know, Ryan told me, he said, you know, I need to get away from some of these people that I've been hanging out with. You know, I just, you know, we're going to move into a different apartment. We're not going to tell anybody where we live except you guys, you know, and I need to take a break from everybody. And he did that. And then he was gone within 3 months from moving into that apartment. The day before everything, or 2 days before everything happened, it was a Sunday, and we had all been going to his music shows, watching him, and he came over to see me that night, and he was just dressed to the T. You know, I mean, he's wearing this pink sharp polo shirt with this black jacket on, and his bandana, and his hair was freshly done. I mean, he just looked absolutely perfect. And we had the best conversation sitting there, you know, and he told me that night, he said, Mama, you know, I'm not really feeling right. When I was at work the other day, I passed out. He said, but don't worry, I have an appointment on Wednesday with the heart doctor. is what he told me. And, don't worry about it, Mom. I'm not messing around with it. I'm going to make sure that, that I'm taken care of. You don't ever have to worry about it. He'd lost, one of his really close friends. He was 18 years old and he overdosed. And, he told me, you don't ever have to worry about that, Mom. It's not anything that's ever going to happen to you. And, yeah, 2 days later, I was just getting home from work. Me and my husband were both just getting home from work. My son's girlfriend came down the stairs and she said, "You need to call Tristan right now. Tristan wants you to come over." Well, I tried to call Tristan and she didn't answer. So we started heading over to Ryan and Tristan's house. This is his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
We're just randomly talking. I'm like, man, Ryan must have really pissed off Tristan. He's in trouble, She's making us come get him. He must be really in trouble. And we got about halfway there, and my aunt called my husband, and it picked up on the speaker on my car.
Yeah.
And she just screamed Ryan was dead in the speaker. Oh. And from there, I mean, I remember trying to jump out of the car. I just trying to get there.
Yeah.
And when we finally did get there, which seemed like an eternity, it was probably only 2 minutes. The first thing I remember noticing was there was no ambulances. There was just a cop car, and the cop was at the door and he wouldn't let me in, wouldn't let me go in to Ryan. And they just, they said that he was gone. Tristan was standing out there. She was crying. She really wasn't making too much sense. I just automatically assumed that it was Brugada syndrome.
Yeah.
And then the coroner came, and this was maybe an hour later. It seemed like 40 years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she came up to me and she asked me if Ryan had any abuse problems with drugs. And I said, yeah. I said, but he's clean. I said he was, he used to use anti-diarrhea medicine, and he's also been on heroin before. He's, but he's currently clean. And then she told me that there was anti-diarrhea medicine all over the apartment.
Oh, wow.
So that she was assuming that that's what happened to him at that point. I still didn't accept that at that point, because I really thought that he was clean.
Yeah, of course not.
So she let me go up and see him at that point. I guess she moved him a little differently from how he was found, from what Tristan, because Tristan was the one who came home to him, and she couldn't get in the bathroom door. He was behind the bathroom door, and the dog was just flipping out the whole time, and she couldn't even get in there. But they moved him and let me come up and say my goodbye to him, and he looked like an angel, like instantly.
Yeah.
Just like my baby.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, were telling me, no, don't go, and you don't want to see that. And I'm very thankful to this day that I got to say goodbye to Ryan, because I didn't get to say goodbye to Chris like that. And for good reason with Chris.
Yeah.
Within about 3 days from when Ryan passed away, they just, they called me and they said, his reason or cause of death was accidental overdose. And I said, no, that's not right. He's got Brugada syndrome. And they went through everything, because I disagreed with it. And they said that he did not have Brugada syndrome. And I told him, I sent them the paperwork that I had from all these doctors telling me that he had Brugada syndrome, and she had to do research herself to tell me that the only reason that he tested for it is because of the medication that he was taking. So, wow. I mean, I was just clueless to it. And then within a couple days, I was starting to, come to a little bit. And I remembered that Ryan told me that he had made an appointment with his heart doctor. And
Yeah.
I noticed this number had been calling me. So I called the number back, and it was a treatment facility that he was trying to get into.
Oh. Oh.
So he was not telling me the truth about that, but he was trying,
Yeah.
obviously, to get some kind of, help, because he
Yeah.
was trying something.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. So 25 was when Ryan passed away.
Yeah.
And the world's just not the same without him.
No.
He just kind of radiated this. I mean, anybody that would talk about Ryan, they talk about how he comes in the room and he didn't miss a person to make laugh.
Yeah.
Like, even if it was just, just anything silly, bumping you in the arm, or, I mean, that was just Ryan's personality. Very, very much
Yeah.
center of attention kind of kid. And he had so much potential. His music is just unbelievable. The stuff that, I mean, I don't know if you know who Juice World is.
I do not. I am not.
He's a pretty famous rapper who's known to just be able to freestyle a rap forever.
Uh-huh.
And that was Ryan. That was 100% Ryan. Like, most of his conversations were raps.
Really?
Like, as he's talking to you, he's rapping to you and what he's saying. He was very much like that, very much. And he definitely could have went very far with what he was doing had drugs not interfered with his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very much missed.
Yeah. And that's when your grief journey started.
Yes. Ryan's funeral. I have to touch on that because it was so amazing to see how many people loved my son. I mean, I knew that he was a popular kid. There was no doubt. He had a lot of friends, but every single seat in the big, huge funeral home was filled, plus outside the door. I didn't have, like, any preacher or anybody come speak. It was just his friends that came up and spoke. And we had to be, like, sent off on our way, that we ran out of time. Like, there was so many people up there that, gave the same statements in different ways, that Ryan had saved their lives by, friending them when nobody else, would, and putting them under his wing and putting them into their, group of friends. And it was just over and over all of the same statements from just different. It was really, really amazing.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful feeling to see all of the people that loved him.
That's what I was thinking. That's had to have warmed your mama's heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But obviously the grief affected you, and the grief affected Chris a lot.
Very much so. Yes. So the first couple months after Ryan passed away, honestly, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Very well. My husband did a whole lot of handling, things for me. I barely got out of bed. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping in bed. I was just absolutely miserable, having constant nightmares, and it was not good. And Chris, we had just recently helped him and his girlfriend and her daughter get a trailer. And Chris was really, really, really happy with his trailer. Like, the happiest I had seen Chris was right before everything happened with Ryan. Like, he was so happy to have this place with his girl. And, he considered Angel his daughter.
Yeah.
And just to get a little bit more into Chris, because Chris is just, everybody would say Chris is just Chris. But
I love how, looking at your face, every time you even say his name, you smile.
oh, he was my joy.
from the beginning when you talked about when he was born to now, it's just a huge smile on your face. And those of you listening on the podcast can't see that. So I needed to explain that. It's literally Mama's face lights up every time she mentions Chris's name.
He was definitely my boy. Like, Chris was out of all four of my kids, when it came to anything that I was doing in the house, Chris was behind me.
Yeah.
He was like taking the rag and, no, Mom, I'll do this, or let me do the dishes, or I'll take the garbage out. He was my special helper all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And it's just in his personality. And he really was a people pleaser, I mean, he definitely, Chris had his struggles. He struggled with anxiety a whole lot during his teenage years, but he never turned to, hard drugs or anything. He did smoke some weed. Most definitely smoked some weed. Chris was, definitely a weed smoker.
Yeah.
But other than that, he was a very, chilled, laid back kid. His depression was open for the world. Like, his heart, it was an open book.
Yeah.
Like, his Facebook, if Chris was having a bad day, everybody in the world knew that Chris was having a bad day.
Man, he so sounds like my Andy. They were so similar personality wise. From the ADHD to the anxiety to the emotions just on the sleeve. Every bit of it.
Yeah. And I mentioned that in particular because of what actually happened to Chris, because anybody that knew Chris knew that he did struggle with anxiety and depression, and especially a whole lot more after he lost his brother.
Yeah.
Chris did have epilepsy too, to top things off. But, that was the least of our problems at that point with, we got his seizure disorder under control, and he was doing pretty well with that. And probably about 5 months after Ryan passed, it just became unmanageable for Chris in general. He was not doing anything at his trailer the way that he used to. He wasn't cleaning up. He was running his girlfriend off. She had kind of had it with him, and she was just at the verge of leaving him, and she gave him one more chance, and finally she gave up and left him, and he started, hanging around with way worse people that, were not helping him at all.
Yeah.
And I stepped in and brought him to my house to live with me.
Yeah.
Because I thought that I could keep him, safe together. And me and Chris, he lived upstairs. I lived downstairs. I gave him a ride to work every day. And he was just the best person to ride with in the morning. Like, he was happy, just like, it was just like the best. Like, we just listen to new music and have the greatest conversations, and things just they seem to be doing a whole lot better with Chris there.
Yeah.
Until he lost his job at a restaurant that he was working at, because he called in one time or something, and he got a little depressed at that point. And we, as a family, we got him out of it. Like, we'd know, like, when he was down, we'd do something special and, bring Chris to where he was, surrounded by us, whether he wanted to isolate or not.
Yeah.
Me and Chris had this, like, I would take him to work, and then we'd come home and we'd have lunch together, and every day we pinky promised together that we would not give up and leave each other.
Yeah.
Like, every day. Like, we didn't even have to say anything. We just look at each other and just pinky promise. And,
Yeah.
he promised me all the time he was not going to leave me no matter how hard it got. And about, I would say it was probably the middle of February, we were getting close to Ryan's 1 year. And Chris just stopped getting out of bed. Like, I could not get him to get out of bed for anything. I was coming up there every day, bringing him different things to try to, just cheer him up a little bit. And it got to where I actually had to, take off his clothes and put him physically into the bathtub and wash him. He was so depressed. And then he he got out of it. Like,
Yeah.
he snapped out of it for what seems like he did for everybody. He started doing these Facebook lives with a bunch of his friends, and he was super into it. I know he would talk about all of his video games. He was a very big video game seller, like not new games, but all old games, all of the, Pac-Man and Atari. Like he has a huge collection that I still sit with, that he was working on his own store. And he was super excited about all those live things. And he was starting to move on. It seemed a little bit better. We did, to get him out of bed the last time, we did the practice lantern release because that's what we were going to do for Ryan. And we just couldn't get him to do, to cheer up a little bit. So we did it, a couple weeks before Ryan's 1 year, and that did finally get him, the family being around. It finally got Chris to where he was feeling better. And then he got a job offer. So that was on 4/9. He was in the back being my special helper, helping me rake all the leaves. This was kind of at the point of my grief with Ryan, where I thought we were going to be okay. I really did. I was finally at the point where I was putting everything I had into my yard and my house and making it a memorial garden and sinking every single bit of myself so that I did not have time to sit and be sad around my kids anymore, because I couldn't stand to do that to them anymore. Like I needed to push myself. And I was finally getting there. And, Chris was in the backyard with me that day. We were raking for a good 3 or 4 hours, and he got a call. This Owens nursery around here wanted him to come apply, and they needed him to come in for his interview right then. So his dad was like, okay, I don't have to go to my second job for a little bit. I'll take you. So he took him, and Chris got the job, and he was to start the next day. He was super excited. He just started talking to this girl that I had never met. So I have to go back a little bit. A little bit. So about a week before everything happened with Chris, he started talking to his ex, the one that he lived with the trailer with the little girl. She had moved to Florida, but they started talking again. And Chris was he said they were going to get back together, and he wanted to move to Florida. And I was so happy that she was wanting, because I always felt that they were really, really a great match. I mean, she drove everybody crazy in a way, but to me, I just thought she was perfect for my son. I really did. I mean, she was sweet, and I loved her daughter, and she was just a kind-hearted girl. And that was the plan. And then all of a sudden, the day after he got this job, he just walks by me, and he hadn't even started the job yet. He was just gone for the interview and was going to start the next day. And he just walks by and he says, by the way, me and Amanda aren't any longer. This is Jennifer. Like, okay. So Jennifer was 2-3 years younger than me. So this was pretty surprising to me.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit younger than that, but she was pretty close to my age. So I mean, we were just all like, where'd this girl come from? Like, this is just crazy, And I met her for probably 20 minutes, and this was right at the start of COVID, I have to say. The very beginning of COVID. And Chris, in hindsight, he took COVID a whole lot harder than I did or anybody else in my family. Like he really felt that the world was at threat. That something was he was watching the newscast where they were saying it was starting where people were picketing, and like everything was going wrong at that point. I think it was around the George Floyd time. At the same time, people were breaking into things. They were talking about the martial law being stuck in the house. Well, funny thing about Chris was a little bit of agoraphobic and did not leave the house. He did not want to leave, hardly ever. But when they told him that he couldn't, it became a huge issue to him. A huge issue.
Yeah.
So he really, really, really stressed out about the COVID thing. I mean, I guess I have to mention that because it's the only reason that I've ever been given as to why my son got a gun.
Yeah.
It's the only one that anybody's ever been able to give me, is because he was afraid somebody was going to break in to our house, like they were saying. But so on 4/11, the day that everything happened, my son Matthew and his best friend Dominic they were painting our front steps. So I mean, this is just a very normal day. It was the day before Easter, actually. And both of those, my son and his friend, said that they were going to paint the front steps for me. Chris had Jennifer over the night before, and his friend Justin was there, and they had made a huge mess in my kitchen. Huge mess cooking. And I was sending Chris like message after message, Christopher, get down here and do your damn dishes. I'm not doing your dishes. And he's sending me middle fingers and no and messing around, and then he walks by and waves as he's going in there to clean his dishes. That's just the way Christopher was. He was joking with me like, I'm not going to clean it, but as he's walking by. So he goes in, he cleans his dishes, and my husband and we were getting Easter baskets ready for my grandson and granddaughter, and I was getting ready in my room, and he came in, talked to me, talked to his bearded dragon for a little bit. I remember specifically he had mayonnaise on his top lip, and I had not said anything to him about the mayonnaise. I just noticed it and like was letting him talk to me. So when he walked by and he said, well, where are you guys going? We told him where we were going. We were supposed to be there at 3:30. We were late. It was already 4 by then, so we were running late. And he said, all right, well, I'll see you guys when you get back. And we left somewhere between 4 and 4:15, and we had to stop at a store because we were going to drink some beer with my son-in-law and his girlfriend. And my husband went into the store that we never go to. Don't know why we chose the store. It just happened to be exactly the same spot that my aunt called when Ryan died, that we were right in front of, the Hy-Vee store. So
wow,
to have those two things happen at the same time or at the same places, I hate Hy-Vee. Don't like Hy-Vee at all.
I'm sure.
But I'm sitting in the car waiting for my husband to come out, and my phone rings, and it's Matthew. It's 4:49, and he is screaming hysterically. As I'm trying to understand what he's saying, my husband is walking up to the car, and he's on speakerphone with our neighbor, and I can hear the neighbor telling him something's wrong. You guys need to get home right away. And then I heard Matthew say, Chris shot himself.
Wow.
And I don't know how we made it home because we went 100 cutting cars off, like blowing every single red light to get home. When we pulled up, I saw an ambulance, and I 100% thought that it was Chris in there. And I was so thought that he was going to be okay. Like it wasn't what it was. And Matthew just came running up to me and said, no, he's not okay, Mom. And that began the nightmare of losing Chris. Everybody attacked Jennifer. Everybody. She was in the room with him when it happened.
Wow.
She was the only one that we could get answers from at that point. She told us that she was sleeping and that she woke up to Chris. And the bigger question was, where the hell did Chris get a gun? I have no guns in my family.
Right.
I have never even touched a gun. My boys they have never touched guns. So that came to light shortly that this kid, Dart, that Chris knew from a job that he did when he was like 15 or 16 working for a concession stand. He had come over to our house earlier that day and he walked through and my dog about tried to kill him. Just went off on him, and she's not normally like that. She's pretty calm, and especially with her dad right next to her. So I wish I would have seen that for what it was at that point, because it was him bringing that to my house, and he sold it to Chris for, I think, $50 and a bag of weed.
Oh my.
And he left my house and Chris was gone within 20 minutes.
Really?
He had a gun in his hand for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. And honestly, I mean, if you ask anybody in my family, you ask any of Chris's friends, no matter how many times Chris was sad, they'll all say he didn't do it on purpose.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. And you know, I mean, from what Jennifer told me, you know, because I grilled her on where did this gun come from? How did this happen? You know, I mean, and she said that Dart came over, sold him the gun, showed him how to load the clip, put the clip in, and put this safety or something on. So when he did that, though, whenever he showed him how to load it, he put a bullet in the gun doing that. You know, he put one in the chamber.
Yeah. So
when Chris was found, there was no chamber in it.
Yeah.
The whole thing was it wasn't even near him. So what I've come to believe is that he did not know that there was a bullet in there when he did what he did.
Yeah.
Because he was very silly like that, and you know, he didn't think about things like that. Like, he should have never had a gun. He should have never had a gun.
Yeah.
You know, and one thing that I wish that when I am strong enough and, you know, a little bit time, you know, more time has passed where I've had a little bit more time to handle things. One thing I really want to do is try to get a law for things like this. Dart, he got charged. He got charged for stealing a gun. First of all, he stole it from somebody and then he sold it to Chris. So they were able to get charges on him. But I would love to see a law that if you sell a gun illegally and that gun is used to harm someone or for somebody to harm themselves, I think that you should be held responsible for their death. And that is my life mission at this point, because he did know, you know, everybody knew that Chris shouldn't have had a gun in his hand. Everybody knew that.
Yeah.
Like, he was not stable, and especially not a year after losing his brother, you know.
No.
And people will say, well, do you sometimes think that he did it on purpose? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely do, but I also absolutely believe that 1 second later from that, he would have changed his mind.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm like that. I'm like that.
Yeah.
Don't put a gun in somebody's hand who is depressed and dealing with stuff like that. I just know that wouldn't have happened had it not.
Right. I mean, you look at him too, personality wise, with just having ADHD gets you, so you make kind of some rash decisions, right? So,
yeah.
But like you said, it's likely that he didn't even know.
Yeah.
He didn't pay enough attention to know that there was even a bullet in there, but it kind of, in some ways, it doesn't matter, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whether it was totally by accident or kind of on purpose in that instant that he thought maybe it was a good idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, doesn't matter.
Yeah, still lost him. Yeah.
You still lost him, and he still wasn't certainly in his right mind thinking about that.
Exactly. I mean, and I know that for a fact. I mean,
right.
From seeing him before, and just even 20 minutes before it happened, he posted a Snapchat of some cookies that he made and said, "Oh, come on over and get some cookies." Like planning his death. He was not. I mean, he had a date. Yeah, he had.
Well, he just took a job. He just took a new job.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just very shocking, of course, to say the least.
Yeah.
For, and honestly, before I had a discussion with the coroner, I 100% said accident. I mean, like,
yeah,
an accident. And then they called me and they said it was suicide. And, I argued with her. I said, no, how can you possibly tell me that he did it on purpose? And she said, I can't tell you that he did it on purpose, but I can tell you that he did it with his own hand. Therefore, it's suicide. Yeah. I'm like, okay, now I understand what you're saying a little bit. I did not understand it at all.
Yeah.
To hear it, as she was saying it at first, but now I understand that that's the reason why it has to be called that.
Mm-hmm. But it like I said, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because you lost him anyway. And whether he had planned it out, which he clearly didn't plan it out, but even if he had, it doesn't matter because he's still gone and he's still lost.
Yes.
From you, right? For your life. Mm-hmm. And again, he still wasn't in his right way of thinking.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all.
Because I think of all these kids, obviously I deal with talking to parents, so they're kids that make this decision then to take their own life. They feel like they had not a choice in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
And I can't say that I haven't felt the same. I mean, that's it, since the loss of my boys, I have struggled with suicidal thoughts so much that, and it's very hard when you have two kids still here on earth.
Right.
I mean, they are the reason I live.
Yeah.
100% the reason I live. But sometimes those demons and that darkness just takes over your head and you can't hear the stuff that you should be hearing. And here instead, your mind's telling you something totally different, like they're better off without you and all this stuff that's complete bullshit.
Right.
You feel it and you convince you. I mean, and that's where I ended up in the hospital, was to save myself from myself.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Yeah. And we talked about that part a little bit before we started recording. So I do want you to mention that a little too, because, obviously you lose two of your boys so tragically like this. It is going to leave you in a fragile place.
Very much. Very much.
Yeah.
I definitely feel that, it's 5 years since Ryan and 4 years since Chris, and I didn't think I was ever going to be able to get up out of bed without instantly opening my eyes and crying. And I do now.
Yeah.
I mean, that if there's anybody listening, that's going through their first year or second year, no, it doesn't get easier, but it becomes manageable. Like,
yes.
I mean, I guess that's the only way to put it, is it becomes something that you just become a little bit more used to.
Mm-hmm.
And the hole is always there, though.
Yes. Yes. The hole is always there. And you're always carrying that with you. It's just that it may not always feel quite this heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Some days, it's so crippling heavy. And, other days you're actually able to laugh and smile. And, I used to punish myself for that, like smiling.
Yes.
Deserve to smile.
Right.
I mean, it took a lot of training my brain to know I do deserve to smile. I do deserve to, watch my, my other children flourish in life.
Yeah.
And they are amazing. Like, their perseverance is, they say kids just and they're not kids, 20, 21 and or almost 22 and 23. They're not kids, but I couldn't be more proud of how they have handled the struggles in their life and still persevered. And it's just amazing to me, because I never went through anything like that when I was 16, and 17,
Yeah. Kids are amazing.
Yeah.
Their resilience is amazing. Well, and we talked too about just how different times can just kind of get you, right? We talked about this before we started recording. I'm going to just bring this up again. And the reason is because, Chana wrote to me on July 30th. Okay. So all of you know, if you're regular listeners, that I lost Andy in August. And August is just overall a bad month. And I actually woke up on August 1st with a headache, and I had a headache every single day, I was telling Chana, until the 17th of August. So 2 days after the anniversary, every day. So she wrote to me on the 30th. I did write you back immediately. Mm-hmm. Your sister wrote to me as well, very interestingly, but I wrote to you right away. But then you wrote me back, and we decided that you were going to come on in September, because that's when I had the next time. And then August hit, and I just felt like I fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
Things just got so hard in my body. As my therapist always said, your body remembered, right? I definitely had to go start seeing my therapist a little bit more often again, because I just was not in a good place.
Yeah.
And it was just maybe last week, I thought, that's really funny that Nina never wrote to me to tell me what day she wanted to be on the podcast. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago now. It was once we got to September. And then I realized I never wrote her back to give her a choice. And it goes to that. It just sets you back, and just things set you back, and you feel like you're doing pretty good. And I'm going through July and I'm doing pretty good. And then August, just yuck.
And then everything becomes unmanageable, it seems.
Right. And then now September comes and things feel a little better. And I feel like things are going more okay again. And you were very gracious to me because you understood.
I do understand. I do 100% understand. I think that I black out March and April sometimes.
That a month can go by and then you realize, oh my gosh, I guess I just never wrote to her. So I just want to put that out there to all of you, to give yourself grace. And as these years go by, there are things that are just hard.
Yes.
And there are things you need help. And when people tell you you're strong, I hate it.
Yeah.
Because really, we're weak. We're all weak. And that means we all need help.
Yes.
And when somebody tells you you're strong, it's almost like, to me, it feels like they're saying, oh, you're strong, so I don't need to help you.
Suck it up.
Yeah. Yeah, like you're strong.
You can handle it.
You don't need anybody. And we do need people.
We do.
We need each other.
Yes.
My favorite thing is broken people helping broken people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Oh, I agree. It's another thing to be able to relate.
And so that's what we're trying to do here, right? I mean, we're trying to be broken people helping broken people.
Yes.
And when you wrote to me and your sister wrote to me, you're broken. So am I. But that doesn't mean we can't help other people.
Right. Exactly. I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else, any parting words that you really wanted to say?
Don't ever forget Ryan and Chris.
That's right. That's right. Don't ever forget Ryan and Chris.
Just remember that sunshine and joy. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation. Or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.